pjnet.tv. It is Tuesday night, 9 p.m. here on the East Coast. PJNet Live coming up. We're running the bumper. And I see that we are recording. I see that we are streaming to 9 social media profile pages. We have a chat room awaiting, and we have a guest waiting in the green room. So let's count it down to Studio 8 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening and welcome to PJNet.tv. I am your host, Coach Prasick, and Stand Firm Ministries is our guest on the second Tuesday of every month, and we are always glad to hear from that, Jake McCandless is his name. And Jake, you were, before we went on the air, I kept waiting on Jake to arrive in the green room, and at about 5 till I sent him a text, saying, "Hey, it's time." He said, "I'm trying to get in; it won't let me in." So I had to unlock the door. Yeah, sorry about that, Jake.
I was too busy back there eating just the brown M&Ms that you've, that my rider had you pull out for the green room, and the nice expensive water. So I mean, it was great.
Have you seen that smart water in the stores?
No.
Yeah, it's a brand of water, bottled water called Smart Water. It's about $4 for a bottle.
I think you said swamp water. I'm like,
no,
yeah,
Smart Water.
Yeah, Smart Water. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I see people paying $3-4 for a bottle of it, and I feel like saying it's not working. It's.
Hey, I've made jokes about water, but I had some Fiji water. I guess I've been Fuji, whichever it is.
Is that the one in the square bottle?
Yeah.
That doesn't roll.
Yeah, I would say there's something legit about that, and whatever it is, I'm on board. So if somebody wants to buy that for me, I can have it. Otherwise, I'll stick with what I've got. But it was great.
I think that a square bottle makes sense. You can pack more of them in a carton. Yeah. And what amazes me is when you go to the gym, the dumbbell weights are they're round, so that when people drop them, they roll off. It's like, why don't you make them octagonal? And they wouldn't do that. You eat the brown M&Ms, right?
Oh, yellow. You actually
yellow.
Should be yellow.
Okay. I don't eat M&Ms except in trail mix, and I always wonder why they call it trail mix, because I'm trying to get a picture of Daniel Boone getting ready to go off on an adventure, saying, "Becky, when you pack the trail mix, I like the yellow M&Ms."
He would not have accomplished what he did if he had M&Ms in his trail mix, right?
I used to pack. Anyway, Jake, ministry-wise, tell me if there's anything that we need to know about your recent. Since we hadn't talked in a month, bring us up to speed.
Hey, I feel like I'm always like schizophrenic when we talk because I've got several things going on.
No, you're bipolar, tripolar.
Yeah, and so and it's usually you get those irons in the fire, and one thing's going good here, but right now there's something going on in every front. So hey, I'll just start from the top. We'll just go through my different personalities here, but so we've talked about the online church that I've been involved in for 2.5 years, and it's just been amazing to see that just to continue to. It's been interesting because I've got to see it as we upstarted one, locally, and then working with pastors who were upstarting things, and then we'd been in the trenches with that, and just seeing the difference that had of people who were already bought in versus people who were having to migrate to it, and so that's been good. And we've got a big thing coming up next week, and so Discovery Channel has their Shark Week. We're doing Rapture Weeks, and so. The name of the church is endtime.church. And anytime you bring up the end times, the most divisive, blood-churning, dramatic part is when you get in arguments about the rapture. And amazingly, we realized after 2.5 years, we had not even had just a message on the rapture. That's the number one question we always get. So we're taking 5 weeks. We're covering, it's like Rapture 360. And so we're stilling the Shark Week with Rapture Weeks. I don't know which one's going to have more carnage, but so excited about that. We've got guest speakers, really experts in every different view coming in. And so really cool deal coming up beginning next week. So Yeah, so we got that on the online front, and then locally, where I pastor, we're still meeting outside. Of course, we've had the opportunity to go in, but we've been meeting outside since mid-May. And what's neat about it is the church is older, and so it's in the middle of a neighborhood. Like you walk outside and you see. I mean, it's amazing how many front doors you can see, and then we're also on this walking path through this park that's got a lot of activity. And so we're meeting outside with the worship service, and then we've got a tent up that we hit during the week, and then we also are doing in the service where we're handing out water and dog treats and water for dogs and just saying hello.
And dog treats for humans.
Yeah, that's our sign says free water for you and your dog, free dog treats just for your dog. Just to be clear, we want to disclaim. But it's been so cool. Like, we could have been really bummed that we're meeting outside, and it's been hot. It's been, I'm in Arkansas. It's been rough, but it's so cool that we're just in the midst of it, we pause for planes to come over. We pause for crazy things to come drive by, but just, while the service is going on, we've got folks out there shaking hands and meeting, or, well, I'd say trying to shake hands and people avoiding them, but, we're trying, so it's been a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, one of our guests, Del Didway, who's coming up next, said basically he predicted months ago the handshake is gone. Yes. And we were thinking what would take its place. And I thought, well, how about a salute?
There you go. I just, you got to do that right, though. You got to do the salute right. So on the personal front, I've been on a health journey the past couple months, and actually seeing some fruits of that, and long ways to go. But I was at the doctor's, my first time ever to be at a doctor's office and get a good report where I was able to actually drop a medication and got a air high five. So the air high five was pretty cool. So maybe that's something we need to get in as well.
And when you shake hands, you can just shake your hand, like do that.
There we go. You actually do that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You can hold your middle finger in place and make your other finger snap. But that would work.
Well, and one thing we've noticed that, so a couple of events that I've spoken at through Stand Firm have been indoors, and so when you get indoors, you just go back to all those old practices, which are great. I mean, it's great to hug, it's great to shake hands. So by staying outside as we have, it's just really kept us. It's weird anyway, and so you're not going back to your normal things. It's a little easier just to talk from a distance, and I don't know. It's worked for us, and it's helped me on my tan, so it's been good,
So you're on a health journey. Are you doing anything different, or are you just making progress?
It would definitely completely change what I'm eating, and so we're doing a program that me and my wife together, and so we've actually your meals are provided. One of these type programs. And so it's like 5 meals a day, and then they have you fix one, but it's really been building habits. I'm like been a master at like losing weight and not gaining weight, master at that, then losing it and then gaining it back plus some. It's just been like, and so this has been something where we've like been like, okay, hey, this is building some good habits, and so it's been a good change.
Jake, why don't you go on 2 diets? That way you'd get enough to eat.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Well, this less activity during this COVID times like that. But so that's the church fronts and personal. But the real, I guess, the thing that's really taken off is through Stand Firm, our children's book, which I've been talking about forever. It was due out in April because of the pandemic, printing and then shipping, and it's just been a shipping nightmare. Today I've been dealing with 2 different instances, but our children's book, Jesus and the White Horse, is out, and
I've been seeing that. Yeah.
So it's really cool because it's far as we know, it's the first ever traditionally published children's book on Jesus coming back, and we got a testimonial in today that just said it was a grandmother said, "Hey, I wish I'd had these." Had this when my kids were little because they went to church and they heard about Jesus coming back and were scared to death and don't want to talk about it to this day, and so we tried to make it where it's exciting, because it's going to be exciting for us as believers.
Jake, I also see on social media, and I asked you, before we went on the air, you and Sherilyn Bisbano are doing a kind of a joint venture. Tell us, what's the purpose of that? How's it going? What's the future?
Yeah, it's really cool how that came about. So me and Sherilyn, several years ago, we were working on a project that still hadn't seen the day of light of day. But maybe that's why I hadn't. But we began this every Friday doing where we would like go through a prophecy that's been fulfilled, and then that shut down, and we was inactive for a year, 2 years. And she contacted me out of the blue, and just said it'd been on her heart this question of, if we're in a situation where time is short or things are changing, at least in our nation or whatever, how, as a writer, how should we readjust the things we do and projects we seek and all that? So we had this conversation, and through that conversation said, Jake, we ought to do this, put this out there, put this online. And at that same time, the teachings I was doing in churches, I were unable to be in churches at the time. So, I wanted to get them online. And so trying to work with, okay, we've got something here. How do we mix that? And so on Thursday nights, I teach. And so I do a series of 9, we call them one-day conferences. They'd be 2 parts. I'd come into church and, often a Sunday morning, and then maybe come back in the afternoon or evening for the second part, or other times, and try to do that like over a 3-year period, 9 different trips in, and do those conferences. And so I'm doing those on Thursday nights. We're about halfway through those. And so doing those live, and then we come back the next day on Fridays at noon Eastern, and me and Sherilyn are doing it. It's meant to be just, if you watch the teaching on Thursday or caught it later, you can call in with questions, discussions, break it down. And it's cool because she's not tracking necessarily in the things I'm teaching. So she's asking it from, Jake, I really don't have no idea what you're talking about. Here, put it in plain language to us. And so that's really cool. And so and we try at least every other show to have a guest. So it's an hour long, and then the second half of it, we bring in a guest that's really an expert in the field that I talked about. And so that's been just a really cool opportunity. Our guest is unable to make it this Friday, but I'll be teaching Thursday night on the covenants of Israel. And our guest was a filmmaker who's put together, has been on a project for quite a while called Stand with Israel. And he's working with really everybody who, politically, people in Israel, ministers who support Israel, those things. He's done all of these interviews for years, and just a great wealth of information. So I get to, rehash what I talked about. People get to ask questions, and then they bring in somebody that knows what they're talking about, and you get that, that mix there. And so it's been and it's cool. I mean, it's probably like you've experienced here. We started, and maybe I might could get my family in to see a little bit, and then you just see it building. And it's the 2 weeks ago, I taught the first session of a conference called Church We Must Get Israel Right. And it's just something I'm really passionate about our relationship with Israel as a church, and just understanding where that is biblically. And it did extremely well. Within the first hour, we had, I think, almost like 1,500 views. A couple days later, we were 2,000, which was a big jump for us. And then so we had a lot of people come over the next day, and had great conversation and those things. So it's been a cool opportunity.
Jake, we have 6 minutes left. I have about 5 minutes worth of coffee left. On the topic of Israel, since this is something that you're interested in, I would like to get your take. One of the criticisms or questions that New Testament Christians have is the nation state of Israel the Israel that God referred to as his chosen people? Now, as you may know, Israel as a political state is a very secular government. Abortion on demand is legal.
Yes.
So take about 5 minutes to track your take on the nation state, the modern nation state of Israel, and the people, God's chosen people, spoken of in the Bible.
Absolutely. And that to me is one of the missing gaps to just understanding the Bible, just really period, is because really as modern evangelicals, we've disconnected ourselves from Israel. There's a teaching out there, end time wise, it's called covenant theology. Kind of the other side of it would say replacement theology. And so the idea is that, the promises to Israel no longer matter. They now just apply to Christians, but that so the real distinction in Scripture is ethnic Jews and Gentiles. That's the two distinctions. And so for us, as we say the evangelical church, I mean, we're basically saying Gentile Christians. And for one thing, I think we need to really understand is we've not replaced them. If we replace them, you have to throw out the entire Old Testament. It's just unreal. I mean, just how much of the Old Testament is permeated in the New Testament. So, that's one thing we haven't replaced them. All those promises are still on the table. So, and Romans 11:25 to me is just it really explains it all, because in it Paul says, brothers, I don't want you to be conceited about this mystery of Israel, because God's given them a hardened heart, so the fullness of Gentiles can come in. But one day when that comes in, that hardness of heart will go away, and he'll bring them back. And so what he's saying is, I mean, so he's writing to Rome, and Rome's mainly Gentile Christians, Gentile believers, and and think about it. So first century, these Gentiles have believed the Jewish Messiah is the Jewish Messiah, yet his people, for the most part, hadn't. And so they got to be confused. And so Paul is, either he's been asked that or he's just expecting that. And he says, hey, it's not over for them, but there is a hardening of heart that's going on so that Gentiles can come in. And so I think that's the understanding we have to have what's going on big picture. And then you get to and I've heard this a lot. I know you probably heard it as well. People will divide up Israel and say, well, you got spiritual Israel, you got ethnic Israel, you got political Israel, you got all these Israels.
That's where I was going, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just one. It's just one Israel. But it's about the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are in a state, and they are controlling a state, yet they're still hardened in heart towards the Lord and to his ways. And right now, Israel, Tel Aviv is the leading most city with the most homosexuality in it. And so I'm very far away from the Lord, as far as being secular, and then you have just the hardness of heart of really the Orthodox Jews there. But yet at the same time, you have more Jews coming to Christ now than any other time in the world. And so you've got all these factors going on, but ultimately, the people that make up the state of Israel right now, ethnically, I believe the Lord is going to, they're going to go through difficult times, what Scripture talks about. There's still difficulty ahead, what we call Jacob's trouble. But through that, ultimately, they will come to Christ. And so, yeah, I think they completely matter. When we look at the state, yeah, I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but at the same time, God has chosen that people. Unfortunately, for the most part, they're not accepting it.
Well, God has certainly, you're more expert than I am. Maybe I shouldn't make the statements. I should ask questions. It seems to me that God certainly chose that piece of real estate. It is the most disputed land on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything. So there's 3 covenants, and actually I'm teaching on this Thursday night. Really 4 covenants. You have the covenant to Abraham, which is about land. You have the one to Moses, which is about if you follow the law, you'll be in the land. And then you have the one to David that says there's always going to be a king of your people in the land. And then you have the promised new covenant. But the one to Abraham about the land and the one to David were unconditional. The Jewish people did not have to do anything to have that. But it's not been completely fulfilled yet because of that Mosaic law in which they have not kept their end of the condition. And I really think the new covenant doesn't replace, it touches all of those, but it ultimately replaces and fixes the Mosaic law in the fact that the new covenant is we have the Holy Spirit within us. The Jewish people then will have the Holy Spirit within them, and we can carry out the laws. Therefore, we live in the land. And so, as I talk about Jesus coming back in the book, don't get into Israel specifically, but talk about the Lord comes back to save his people. and he's going to come back as king. And when he comes back, he's going to have a Jewish kingdom ruled out of Jerusalem, but as Gentiles, we've been grafted in. That's the family we get to hang
Mhm.
out with, be in his kingdom. And so but it all still comes back to the land and those promises.
Good show. I read Craig von Busick's book about the birth of the modern nation state of Israel, and it's very well documented, very well done.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that the providence of God is very evident. Now, there was a lot of political providence as well,
Yes.
but it's we're out of time, and I'm out of coffee. So,
Yeah.
Jake.
Yeah,
Listen.
that is an important thing, and I think it's something we struggle to get right. I mean, we had leading pastor, one of the largest evangelical churches in America not too long ago, say we just need to unhitch yourself from the Old Testament. I mean, so that kind of, I think, explains our enthusiasm for Israel.
Okay. Well, Jake, listen, take care of yourself, and by the time we see you next month, we'll have to adjust the camera to a different angle so that you won't,
So,
because there won't be as much of you, right?
oh, that's accountability now. I have to stick
Yeah.
with it.
Right. So, all right. Well, Jake, thank you for sharing, Jake, and
Absolutely.
we'll send you on your way. Appreciate it every month, and you're a good man. Thank you, sir.
All right. See you.
Jake McCandless, right here on pjnet.tv. It's not over, folks, at the bottom of the hour. Del Didway comes our way, does so every Tuesday night, and we're looking forward to that. I'm going to make another cup of coffee. I'm going to wrap it up and get the studio ready for Del Didway. 2 questions. Number 1, what is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? Number 2, when was that? The challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.